Or we found you.
Wow.
Ready?
Yes.
1, 2, 3. We're excited! We're excited! We're excited! Shh. To talk about dementia. Hi, Mary. Welcome.
And
Thank
hello
you.
to our Mary and our audience. And we are
Dangle.
and Dot, and together we dare
To do dementia differently.
And we have a phenomenal guest.
We do. We're so excited.
That is paving the way for that. We're so fortunate. You know, Nancy and I take inventory every now and then of all the good things that have happened to us and our journeys with this labeling of dementia and caregiving.
Yeah, cognitive decline, as
Yes,
one might
and
gently say.
we love to put a big list together of all the wonderful things that have happened.
And Mary was at the top of that
because
list.
of that, and a lot of times it's the people we have met
Right.
along the way.
Mary Fridley, welcome. Reimagining Dementia, a creative coalition for justice. And wow, when I met you, Mary, what a revelation came to my life. And I fondly think of you and all that I've learned since we've met. Today, we might venture into the mother-daughter story. We all have one of one sort or another. There's no wrong, there's no judgment, there just is. And maybe what you hear today will help you. And that's what Dangle and Dot hope to do, is to explore good things that come from, and also the reality of what is.
Yes.
So, Mary, you're on.
Okay, and I'm surprised my head is not filling the entire screen, given all the things you just said about me. But I'll try to be appropriately humble and seriously the same back at you both. It has been just such a joy because in addition to the Reimagining Dementia Coalition, I led a workshop series called "The Joy of Dementia." You got to be kidding.
And isn't that the truth?
And so I think hopefully people know by now that I am a big proponent of creating joy everywhere we are. So, but it is genuinely a real joy to be here and to participate in a conversation.
Yes. And yes, the world needs to hear from Mary, and we're going to let you speak about that again.
Okay.
You are the ultimate galvanizer.
Well, thank you. I have spent the last 50 years of my life as an activist and a organizer of community, and even probably, well, I'm 72 now, so even before that, the 22 years before that, I think I was always a doer. Like I just had an impulse to, if something was happening, to try to dive in. So I'm thrilled to be considered a galvanizer, hopefully of good.
We're good.
Yes. So I know that Nancy, you mentioned the mother-daughter story, and so maybe I'll use that as a little bit of a platform to kind of share a little bit about where I'm coming from in terms of dementia.
I think that's great.
Because I think it's a little bit different than often what's heard, and that doesn't make it better, it doesn't make it worse. And I do urge that anyone watching this kind of, I don't know, try not to fit what I'm saying into whatever already is known. Not because I think I'm some purist. I mean, we all do that. But I think it may open up some new pathways and some new possibilities, even when what I say may sound strange or, unusual. But I did have a mother, so in that way, I'm completely normal, I guess. And she passed away from late-stage dementia. And I recently wrote a piece for LinkedIn called Emotional Yes, ! tragedy, no, exclamation point. My mom, Tom Kitwood, and me.
Mhm.
So I'll talk a little bit more about who Tom Kitwood is. I mean, many in the dementia arena know him, but many also don't. So I will get to Tom, but right now we're talking about my mom. And in it, I share briefly. I mean, obviously we were together for 60 some years, so a lot happens in that time. But I learned a lot. Well, I learned a lot from my mom, but I also, in kind of going through this journey with her, and what I shared in the piece is that kind of reflected, I think, on many, like as is the case with many people. My mom and I had a very kind of conflicted, sometimes rocky, sometimes. I mean, I always loved my mom, so it wasn't a. I don't mean it so dramatically. And there was a period of time I was not a big part of her life, or my family's life, and that was a decision I made because it seemed healthier for me. So I don't want to make this like, oh, we just um, and and as I share in the piece, part of it, and again, I'm not a big, I'm not that thrilled about attributing things that happen to you as an adult in some linear way to what happens to you as a child. So, so I'll try to do this, as honestly as I can. I mean, particularly when I was growing up and as a teenager, my mom could be mean, even older. And as I say, there was no one who could be more effective at pushing my buttons than she did. I bless her. And I think both of you know me pretty well. I'm not particularly an angry person. I am not I don't fly off the handle. I don't react very often. And she could make me see red in a way that no one else can. So that was all part of it. And she also, there was much more to her. So, however, when she, but also growing up, I was, I wasn't out yet as a lesbian, but as I say in the piece, I was certainly steadfastly if what we used to call a tomboy. So it was different, always was different, and felt different. That's always been a big part of my life. And she was somebody who really valued femininity and was very good at it. And in the way that she related to it, I think it did hurt deeply, and I think it had an impact. So I said this in the piece by way of course, when she was living with dementia, and I shared it broadly. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And of course, as they do, and I think it's said often with love, is people would ask me if she knew me. And that was never a concern that I was consumed with. But I would kind of say, well, one, I don't know. How would you possibly know that? I don't know. But really, I think she and I didn't know each other for much of our lives. And I didn't want to pretend at this moment it was suddenly a big, life experience. I just didn't want to be hypocritical about that. I mean, she and I, for a number of years before she died, she and I had worked hard to break out of being mother and daughter, actually. And I think we became more friends. I think we were able to learn about each other in ways that both of us were probably a little surprised by. I mean, I just got to know her, and she was an interesting person. It was fascinating to me, to all the things that, I sometimes really do feel bad sometimes. And in this way, it's unrelated to dementia, because, I was doing a workshop in Richmond, Virginia, a couple of weeks ago. And I said again, it's the Joy of Dementia workshop. And one of the things we were talking about is how dementia there were people living with dementia there, care partners, others. And I said, I don't wish anyone that, but I wish dementia was the only label and diagnosis in that room. because I think we are a labeling culture. I don't think we see people as fully human anytime. I think we see people through their labels and identities. And I've always felt a little bad. I mean, and I think mother is one of the most repressive ones. I think in that sense, mothers get a bad deal. And I'm not saying mothers that you both had them, you have your own relationships with them. I am not denying at all. Very hurtful things have happened and things that really impact on people. On the other hand, one of the joys of this experience was it gave me the opportunity to just say, let's figure out what we can do together, and we'll kind of discover who we are. Um, and it had little to do with being family members. And actually, that's one of the things I like best about aging is you can kind of decide, even in your brother or sister's family, you can decide who you want to hang out with. And those bonds don't have to be the determining, like some, just because they're family doesn't mean they're people you want to hang out with. And that's fine. I know it creates a lot of tensions. And certainly it did, because in my case, my family, my brothers and sisters had a very conflicted, and that's probably being kind, relationship to my mom. So I did end up playing a very kind of key lead role in it. And it's not that I didn't have feelings about that. I don't want to sugarcoat it. But ultimately, it kind of forced me also to realize, hey, we are the people we are. And we've been outside of our families for a long time. So at some point, we're deciding who we want to be. And now we're going to have to figure out how to navigate that. And in a funny kind of way, with the joy of dementia, I think that's what we're trying to help people to do in life. I mean, I think is to how do you enter like complex, life-changing, emotionally painful, or at least very emotional situations with people you quote know, but everything has changed. And you can't really fall back on what it is you think you know. How do you take all that and create some new ways forward?
Yeah.
That is both acknowledging everything and also saying, okay, we can create something else. And maybe it doesn't rely on people playing the same roles. Maybe it's not recognizable as, what your mom might do or what you might. And that was for me, and I'm not speaking about myself, that was a joy for me. And, as it happens, my mom, it was a fairly quick decline, and she lost her ability to speak. Although I came to realize she lost her ability to speak English or something that I understood. She was speaking. She was being very active. Like, she wasn't sitting there mute. She was chatting a lot to people I didn't see, but she was having a good time with. And yes, and then she could be emotional. All of that was true. It's a very complex human thing, as you know. And I think being less bound by needing something from her, I realized I wanted to be there with her. And I wanted to do what we could do together. Yes, did it make a difference when these various things? But yeah, sure. I'm not making light of that. It jars you. It is deeply emotional, and again, not don't want to sound glib, but so are a lot of life circumstances. And I know both of you pretty well, but I think this is also true probably for many people listening. We all go through life where we have the experience of our life turns completely upside down, and the people that we know are suddenly, we don't have any sense of who they are. And people who were once a big part of our lives it happens with friendships. It certainly happens in marriages and relationships.
Yes.
Where you go, wait a minute, who is this person? And I'm not saying that lightly. That's painful. I've gone through it. I was a therapist for many years. I worked a lot with people in relationships and couples, and so I have a very good sense of just how much agony people go through. But I also learned that a real like a real foundation of that agony, and I think it makes it more agonizing than it need be, is how much we need to hold on to what was, and to
Yeah.
continue to see people through a prism of what makes us comfortable, of what we're familiar with, of what,
Mhm.
and that makes that we might be afraid of. And but in a way, if anything, in this work, I think dementia has highlighted that. But I don't think it's a special experience in that way. Now, are the responses to often harsher to dementia? Yes, I think and although I don't know, I mean, I remember, I mean, I say this glibly, but again, I remember the experience of going through heartbreaking relationships and wanting that person to disappear. Now, I probably said harsher things, but I'll clean it up. And I don't know, that was no less like I could not see them as human beings anymore.
Mhm.
So I'm just saying we have that impulse, we have that, and we are pretty contained and confined by the labels and that sense of who we are, whoever that is.
Yeah.
So
And
that to me, that was a valuable part. And so I'll stop now. There, the thing, but I would love to please.
Oh,
And
no,
honestly,
I
if I'm
want
going on, wave your hands or something.
no, when you were talking about interacting with your mom when she could no longer form words that you really understood, I think
Right.
you wrote about the cigarette
Yes.
smoking
Right. Yes.
like
Yes.
play you were doing with each other or
Yes.
ballet or
It
dance.
was
That was,
creating a performance because yeah,
yeah.
one day I was sitting next to her on the out. We were sitting outside, and I just noticed that she would slowly move her hand, like, and
Wow,
I realized this
She was
woman.
still smoking.
Just
yes.
to say this woman was a smoker is like I don't know. To say the Grand Canyon is big.
Okay.
She smoked every hour of the day. So, 65 years of smoking. And she just would. So at some point, I kind of realized, oh, she's
Oh.
smoking. So I kind of just joined in and we kind of created this balletic because it was very slow and kind of balletic. So
Mhm.
we created that together. So, it was it was a gift. Um, and I think that one of the things, I mean, I think I've learned this much more as an adult, and certainly this reinforced this. I think that, and as both of you know, I'm a big proponent of improvisational play,
Mhm.
and understanding and relating to people as performers and players, if you will, not in not in the Las Vegas sense of that living.
We do have to
Uh,
find
Thanks
that.
for that notation.
right, exactly. And I think that one of the things, improvisation, which has and begins, as you all probably have some sense, and hopefully many know in the watching this too. But I'm not going to do a lecture on improv. But at the heart of improv is yes and.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And amongst other things, it highlights the importance of yes, just simply saying yes. Because often, and I think it's a cultural thing, and certainly we all manifest that. I think we're much quicker to say no. And at a minimum, we were much quicker to say, or yes, but to put some kind of conditional on it, as opposed to what does it mean to say yes
Mhm.
fully?
It's more scary to say yes.
Yes, that is my sense. And I mean, in a way, this is where, I would love for you to respond because I imagine those watching will have similar response. What are you talking about?
Mhm.
So yes, you just kind of live with yes, and then yes, and is a commitment as a group, as an ensemble, as a to take it somewhere new.
Mhm.
And I think that amongst the value of it, because coming back to what we were talking about, I think it allows you to see gifts wherever they are. And gifts come in all kinds of packages, including stuff that you may not even want to deal with. So I don't think gifts are
Yeah.
just all the wondrous things that we do
Yeah.
for each other and with each other. It's
Mhm.
the offer, and it's the saying yes, and the and is let's see what we can create with this.
Mhm.
And it's
Keep the conversation going.
exactly to build something, to go somewhere new, to see what together we can do. And that's a
Mm.
different life experience because we are in a go it alone culture. We have to kind of master things, move forward, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not a big proponent of it, but I understand that it's not, and I can get caught up in it. I'm human. But I was in, and I thought what you're saying, Nancy, is helpful about the fear because I was um, the same workshop in Richmond, um, which was a wonderful grouping. It's an existing group, and it was one of the more multiracial, actually, settings that I've been in. So they were just really delightful group of people. And at some point, we had been doing a lot because I do a lot of exercises, and we play together. And we were doing yes, we were kind of practicing yes and at some point, and kind of to your point, Nancy, one of the gentleman who takes care of his wife um, kind of just started to insist that no, he had to say no, and it was particular to his family. And again, I'm not. He didn't go into great depth, but uh, one of the things he shared was his family not understanding why he and his wife couldn't go with them on a vacation, and it was clearly a source of pain and emotion. And we did not get into the whole situation, but he just said, no, I have to say no to them. I have to say no on those. And it became clear he was not the only one. And there was an emotionalness to it that was just took me a bit aback.
Mhm.
And we tried to play with it as we could. But I think to your point, one of the things I came away, and again, this is not the first time I've experienced this, is how much, to your point, Nancy, no becomes a way to stave off the emotionality
Yeah,
and
I think that's
the
true.
absence. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think in part because yes and is completely misunderstood. In our culture, I think because we're such a careful and protective, but we don't want to we don't want anyone to get us on something. We want
Get
to
too close.
get too close or even get us in some kind of more negative way. We don't want to be fooled. We don't want to be, we don't want to give of ourselves and then
Mhm.
have someone, although
Mhm.
that happens all the time. But I think we're protective. And that I understand that. And it just maybe it just deepened for me. Um, how much the misunderstanding of yes and meaning, oh, I have to go along with whatever you're saying. So if I say yes, I'm immediately saying, well, then, and
No.
I think that's a, a it's a serious misunderstanding. And I can understand if that's what you believe, why it
Right.
would be a barrier. I'm not, I can completely understand that. I hear it as yes, because I just think it's important for us to say yes. I think in terms
And
of what it opens up, right?
right.
And
And let me
again, I'm not saying
share.
if somebody tells you to cross the street and a car is coming, it's fine to say no. I'm not
Thank
being a
you,
literalist.
Mary.
But I think this is as much an attitude as I'm not talking so if anyone is standing there go, well, yeah, what I have to say. Yes, there are moments it's okay to say no with a small n. Um, Although I still think you could say yes, and I'm not crossing against the light. I mean, it's not as if you've become a puppet to somebody. But I think emotionally it hurts us. And I think it actually, in my mind, it leaves us more vulnerable and keeps us more isolated. which is already such an issue. Because in a way, yes, and is simply saying yes. I I I am accepting what you're saying. I may not like it. Has nothing to do with whether I like it, whether it's
Mhm.
my cup of tea, and let's see what we can do with it. And it doesn't mean going on a vacation somewhere, but it might mean what else could the family and friends do together.
Do together.
Right.
And that being completely, I mean, it was just, it, to me, I just felt so heartbroken. Not,
Mm,
not critical, but it was heartbreaking because everyone was so isolated.
right.
And, 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 and I think fear often gets, it often gets identified as the reason we don't do things or the reason we do things that are kind of being
Mhm.
jerky,
Right.
not being very nice. And I'm
Yeah.
not discounting fear, but I think what yes and opens up, and that's why I really do try to live it, is it opens up immediately the question of how, including, I mean, I did a workshop with a group, a wonderful group in India about a month or so ago. And, the conversation got to, kind of hinged around it, whether people were struggling. And I mean, it was very poor people in India. They have a hard life. And then dementia and other things don't make it any easier. That to me that goes without saying. Yes, it is hard. And I decided, well, I'm not going to argue with you. It's not. I'm not. One, I'm in no position to tell you what your life's like at all, and I don't give advice because people generally don't take it. Um, However, I said,
I don't know about
I don't know about that either.
exactly. But do you think you could be open to just having a friendly, kind of playful conversation about, well, how do we want to struggle? Because that at least opens up that you're self consciously kind of figuring out, okay, because I don't think struggle means one thing. I don't think love means one thing. I don't think pain. I don't think emotions mean. I don't think much of anything means anything. This conversation, the meaning of it is going to be whatever we create. So I'm
And
not
it's
going to
different
debate.
to everyone.
It is, but to me, the important thing is it gets created by people together. I'm not speaking to an individual mindset. I'm not talking to people. I don't support people trying to will their way through things. I don't. Do they do it? Yes. And by saying I don't support it, meaning I don't think it's growthful. I think it tends to harm people. Um, I don't think it's very healthy. And I understand all the reasons we do.
Mm.
Um, but I don't think we can willpower our way through. Um, Certainly not even anytime, but certainly these days, I don't even know, given the world we're in, given the complexity of living and everything that's going on, the uncertainty, I don't even know what it would mean to power through something and some using individual willpower. I know people do, and I know I think still too much of the heart of what caring has come to mean in our culture. Um,
What do you think caring means?
well, I think caring is something we create together. That's my. I think it's so. And to your point, I think it's going to look very different for different in different contexts and setting and people. I think what it's too much become, and for a lot of reasons, um, and system. We could have all kinds of talks about politics and systems and things like that. So I am not locating this in our individual failures. I don't think that's particularly the helpful way to see it. But I think caring has become interestingly overly focused on the person being cared for to almost the exclusion of anything else. I think it's one directional, and I think it tends to be, and I'm not talking about every individual person, but I think it tends to be framed by a model of that ultimately I think relates to everyone, including the person being cared for, um, as kind of, and that's overly passive. um, and doesn't kind of relate to everyone as capable of creating something new, creating something else, of deciding how that creating and that caring is going to happen. So I think for people being cared for, I think that leaves them in a very vulnerable position. I think it's a and often again an overly passive one with very few demands or they're asked very little of. And I think that's a healthy giving thing, by the way. I think we could be asking more of people. But also, I think it leaves the person doing the caring so hurt. I mean, it just is. I think in a way, I feel more for in that setup. I'm not talking
For
about
the care partner than
for
you
the
do
care
for the
partner.
care,
Oh,
yeah, the person walking through.
yeah.
And I think we get in that position, Mary, from not knowing that you don't have a care partner doesn't necessarily all the time need to hover and to make all decisions, because once you start doing that,
Yeah.
it's taken away from the
I,
person living with.
I agree. I agree. I think not knowing is certainly a part of it, which doesn't mean I think knowing is the answer, actually, interestingly. Because
Yeah.
I think there's also deeply embedded in that a whole lot of assumptions and attitude. Because I've talked to enough people who I know that, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at some point, so for example, I think, I've shared and the other person who I went through a very important death journey with was my Joy of Dementia co-founder, Susan Massad. She was a physician. And she was just a remarkably radically humanistic um, physician and did everything in the world to create relationships with her patients. She actually, I think, she always viewed as the people coming to her as active participants in their health. Now, what's interesting, one of the things I learned with her, and I saw this in therapy as well, because I also related to people as active creators of their emotional health. People go, no, I don't want to. I want you to take care of me. I want you to know the answers. So I am not Pollyanna. I think we also have a lot of attitudes toward that. And people don't want to know. Just tell me what to do. Just give me the pill. Tell me the diagnosis. That's all I want. So there is not only individually, but socially, there's a lot of attitude. And also, I think the other contribution Susan made, without going into great detail, was the creation of what she would call health teams, which brought people together. And usually they were organized by the person, whatever the condition was. It could be cancer, it could be anything, any life situation that someone didn't want to go through alone. And they would bring together friends or family or whoever they wanted to be in that ensemble, as I call it. Mm-hmm. And really just the role of the group was to ensure that everyone, including the person with the diagnosis, continued to grow and with whatever was going on, not despite it. So it wasn't necessary. I mean, it could include learning more about the condition, but it wasn't focused on that. It wasn't an educational thing. It was more, hey, how are we going to continue living? And how are we going to continue growing? And continuously have to take into account, especially for the person with the changes. I mean, Susan had 4 kinds of cancer. I mean, a lot. She went through a lot, and obviously her capacities altered and changed at various times. But at no point was it any less social, including how we were going to do this, how were we going to do the medical visits. So I also think there just aren't environments in which people can do not knowing and have the support to do that. So I hear you, Nancy, and I absolutely understand what you're saying. Yes, we often don't know. What I invite people to do is discover the people and the places where they can be supported to be more actively not knowers.
Of course.
So they could do something more social,
Yes.
relational, collaborative, and whatever that looks like. For some people, that's going to be this much. For other people, it could be completely life transformative. So I want to, I'm not trying to be just, oh, it's more, we really have to keep opening all this up because left to our own, caring is a fairly
Communication is key.
conservative idea.
Yeah.
It's become,
Communication is key.
say
And
again?
I said communication is key, and the
Yes.
willingness of all
Yes.
participants to understand what is out there and available for them.
Yes, I think that it's a big part of it. And then the yes and to that is how do you take all of that and make it meaningful to your life? Because information is great. And I just know that from my own experience. I've had health issues. And yes, you read things, you learn things. And sometimes I go, I don't have the bloodiest notion how to use all this. And some of it's meaningful, some of it's not. And so fortunately, I have support and have had created a community where we can take all that and go, okay, let's, but always from the vantage point of I'm going to continue growing. So all of this has to be in the service of that. And I think that's unfortunately, and I think it's terrible that honestly, people who go into the medical system, and again, I'm not going to bash the medical system. Everyone else is doing that. They're managing to do that. But I think it's awful. Not only that there's very little, I mean, I'm still stunned by the number of, and this is now 10 years into dementia, and you all been involved longer. I am stunned by people continuing to say there's no information available.
Oh, well, that isn't true.
Right. Or nothing you can do.
Not true.
You can
But
do.
I think it is a real perception. And
There
I
is.
think in part because just because it might appear like there, you know, if you Google, I don't know, creativity and dementia, I mean, there are 3 million things. It's not that there's the absence of information or knowledge just packaged like that. But it still raises the question, what are the environments you need to benefit and learn from that? Because it can also just be daunting. And maybe it's useful, maybe it's not. But how do you include knowledge in a way that promotes living?
Right.
Right.
Rather than some notion of the right way to do things. Because
Right.
I mean, our lives are very different. What's going to work for you is not going to work for Kat. It's not going to work great, but that doesn't mean we couldn't support each other discovering what it is that we need.
Yes.
Yes.
And we are discussing yes and today, and we've talked about your mother, and unfortunately, we only have a couple minutes left. How will we wrap this up?
Blown by.
I know we got so many things we could talk about.
Yeah.
And we'll
Okay,
have
I do have to come by. I definitely have to come by. In part because I really was wanting to talk about Tom Kitwood. Actually, I will talk about Tom Kitwood by closing and urge everyone to read the piece in LinkedIn.
Okay.
But Tom Kitwood was a groundbreaker. He was a British social psychologist who really led the charge in taking, much like Freud did in many ways in the century earlier, of bringing people living with dementia outside the institution and organizing a movement where they began to be related to us people with feelings, with humanity, you know, like, and at that time it was an enormous shift. And that's kind of carried on with person-centered care. That's kind of the movement he inspired. I think there's a whole conversation about what that's become. But the thing I learned from him, and this is the closing, is that at the heart of what Kitwood was saying is in order to, like, he thought dementia could transform the world. Actually, he was excited about the potential transformative potential of dementia. But at a minimum, he thought that if we were going to effectively relate to dementia, we had to shift how we saw human beings.
Yes.
Because right now, human beings pretty much are our brains. And that's true of everybody. I mean, it's a culture built on knowing, and the best knowers and the best reasoners and the best thinkers are at the top of the pyramid. So, and as I've written, and I know you mentioned this, if something begins to happen to us cognitively, well, in a very real way, we are no longer human, because the value of being a knower has become so all defining of what it is to be human. And in a way, what Kitwood was saying, and I feel very inspired by this and would like to think our work is continuing, is no, actually, human beings, people are social, relational, and we have to take, in a way, knowing off the pedestal. That has nothing to do with who and how we are being human. And think about it, if we valued a whole host of other things, our relationality, our creativity, our silliness, our poetry,
Our silliness.
we would have a very different relationship to a lot of things. It's
Yeah.
not, so that has a meaning. And I know people hear that as, oh, that's very fair. No, I think it's actually as practical as learning which doctor to go to, because it affects how we see. So in a way, I'm just trying to help. I think we're helping people. Could we develop some new lenses that at least continue to open up the possibilities? What exists is what exists. Go. And if that's helpful, go for it. Find all the support you can get. However, there are some new lenses that I think need to be brought more into the mix. On that, I will end.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you so much.
I'm
Oh,
gonna.
thank you all.
Yes. Well, and Mary, I want to thank you also for your influence on my caretaking,
Oh,
caring
wonderful.
for my brother and mom for
Uh-huh.
5 years. Simultaneously, really felt like a masterclass PhD
Yes.
program.
Oh,
And-
I so admired you.
Well, and you really helped me in that journey, as did Nancy. Just, thinking, like you said, I had a ton of information. I had a ton of know-how,
Yeah.
just working in the field and being around it for so long. But it was still so darn tough emotionally. Yeah. And really kind of asking the questions, why is this so hard emotionally? Like what those challenging things, and playing with it.
Yes.
And my mom didn't know who I was one day when she does. And just sitting with her and asking questions and going with and I learned so much. And sometimes the days that she didn't know who I was were actually my favorite, because I would hear all these wonderful things. Right. And then
I agree. I think
I actually enjoyed the days she was not more cognitively together, to be honest, because I really got to do the yes and I got to ask her what's going on.
Yeah. Stepping in.
That's wonderful to hear. I'm in whatever role I played in that.
A big one in both our lives.
And
big one in both of our lives, Mary, and we would love to have you back.
Yes.
Well, I'll be back. You know where to find me.
Everyone, please check out Reimagining Dementia, a creative coalition for justice. She's galvanizing the world.
Yeah, she's a wealth of information,
which I agree is going to change us as humans.
That's right.
We
Thank
start.
you.
Yes, and you want to support the Dangle and Dot mission, where we are trying to be lived examples of how you can live well. We do have our book. Is it this way? This way, Nancy.
Yeah.
Over there.
Have over here.
Oh, this plays with your brain. It's available on our website. Dare to Do Dementia Differently feature a lot of what Mary's talking about.
And it's a two-way conversation between a care partner and person living with.
Highlights, stories, resources. Yes.
Well, you all are inspiring, and thank you so much for and everybody support Dangle and Dot.
Yes, and you can. Other way here again. Buy our mission. You can buy us a cup of coffee, which will go to us to help us support
the podcast and
keeping everything going. And
we thank you for your participation.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Take care.
Bye now.
We'll see you again.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining in.
All right.
Let us know what you think.